Alright, steering columns. Effort applied to the steering wheel is transferred down to the steering column or shaft to the steering box. In early vehicles, the steering column was a straight shaft running inside a hollow tube. In many frontal collisions, however, this design caused serious injury to the driver, partly because the steering wheel was forced back towards the driver's head and chest, and partly because of the sudden stop forced the driver into the wheel. To reduce this hazard, all steering columns are now fitted with collapsible sections that help protect the driver. During a collision, two forces are applied to the steering column. The first is the force of the steering box being forced towards the steering column and then towards the driver. Plastic shear pins allow the lower shaft to move over the upper shaft. The second force is the mass of the driver striking the steering wheel. This force breaks the brackets on the upper part of the column, driving the upper column into a lower column. Most vehicles also integrate a driver's side airbag into the steering wheel for collision protection. The steering column is connected to the input shaft of the steering gear by a flexible joint. This flexible joint allows the smooth turning of the steering wheel since the steering column sits at a different angle than the steering box. It also reduces the transmission of road shocks to the driver. Some steering columns have an intermediate shaft which runs at an angle from the column to the steering gear. In a collision, the universal joint on the intermediate shaft allows it to fold under, preventing the impact force from being transferred directly to the column. Some manufacturers fit sensors and electric motors into the steering column. The sensors in the steering column provide information to the steering control module for electric power steering assist or for the electronic stability control system. The sensors are able to sense rotational direction and speed exerted by the driver and control both the speed and direction of the electric motor, which is used to provide the electric power steering assist. The steering column generally accommodates for ignition switch and lock assembly, although more new vehicles are coming with a push-button start switch located on the dash. The steering column also incorporates a multi-function switch or separate switches that may include switches for lights, turn signals indicators, wipers, and cruise control. The steering wheel itself may have integrated control switches for entertainment system, a cell phone, and instrument panel options. Here on the left-hand side, most people do not know about it. It's called a multi-function switch. And with that multi-function switch, it's usually on the left side. It's a turn signal switch as well. You could use this to let other drivers know which direction you're turning, or if you're turning at all. Well, if you push it down, it takes the turn signal blinkers and blinks the left side of your car, indicating, letting the other drivers know you're turning left. And if you push it up, it indicates and tells other drivers that your blinker is going off on the right-hand side of your car and you're going to turn right. Right? It's crazy, isn't it? The technology in cars is amazing. Amazing. And on the B picture here, the steering wheel entertainment controls, a lot of new cars have Bluetooth, and you can turn your radio and stations, volume controls, and even cruise controls on your steering column itself. Alright, the tilt and telescoping mechanism. To compensate for variations in driving positions like myself and Glory over there, which are kind of short, many manufacturers have included a steering column tilting and or telescoping mechanisms in their vehicles. These features allow drivers to control the steering wheel position that is best suits their preferences. The tilting mechanism allows the driver to raise or lower the steering column position, while the telescoping mechanism allows the driver to move the steering wheel closer or further away. However, the amount of movement in any direction does have its limitations. The tilt mechanism uses a heavy spring and a pivoting point and a ratchet mechanism to operate. These added components make the steering column more complicated to repair. The telescoping mechanism includes a slip joint and a locking mechanism. Both these features can also put the wires in the steering column under additional stress due to more frequent movement. So remember that when diagnosing wire faults. The driver's side airbag is designed to provide a collapsing cushion that decelerates the driver's head and chest during accident. You know what? I think I'm reading week 3, 3rd day, because are we? No, we did that yesterday, huh? Just feels like it. All right. One of the leading causes of fatalities and accidents is the rapid deceleration forces that occur within the body during the accident. Restraint systems such as tearaway seatbelts are also designed to slow deceleration. Airbags also decelerate the driver and prevent the head from contacting the steering wheel or dash. Side curtain airbags ensure that the driver does not hit the side rail of the roof when involved in a side collision. Next to the seatbelt, airbags are the biggest lifesaver in accidents. In Hyundais, it is a, what do you call that word? What's that word? A standard option that all cars have side bag curtain airbag. When a technician needs to carry out a servicing procedure on a steering column, it is a good practice to disarm the triggering system for the driver's side airbag, which is usually located in the top cover of the steering wheel. If not properly disarmed, the airbag could trigger accidentally, injuring or killing the technician due to a large deployment force created by ignited propellant, which is rocket fuel. Unintended deployment also creates the need to replace the airbag assembly, which is expensive. You don't want to blow it up, and you don't want to blow it up accidentally in your face. To disarm a driver's side airbag, the correct supplemental restraint system, or SRS, fuse must be located and removed, and then verified by turning the ignition switch to the run, observing the SRS light, which should remain on. Once the fuse is removed, the negative battery terminal is disconnected, and the vehicle is allowed to sit for 15 minutes or more to discharge the capacitors. Note that memory minders should not be used when working on or around an SRS system. Do you know what a memory minder is? It's called a memory saver. What it is you put it in maybe a cigarette lighter adapter. It actually keeps power into your vehicle, so you don't lose like memory functions from your radio and things of that nature. So it's a tool that technicians use when replacing the battery, because once you remove the battery, everything clears out. Especially with Hondas, if you take a battery out of the Honda and you put the battery back, your radio will say it needs a code to turn back on. And to get that code, you have to pull the dash out of your, you have to pull the radio out and find the serial number, call Honda, ask them to give you the code for that radio, if it's not written in your manual in your driver's glove box. But most people don't even have it in there, especially if it's a used car or whatever, it's gone. So it's kind of a pain in the butt. It's a pain in the butt to you, your service manager, and the customer who can't take his car now. Okay? Or can, but can't listen to radio.
So the light control, you know how some cars have seats you can set?
Yes, anything that has a memory, once you take that battery off, it'll be done. No more memory, you have to reset everything. Alright, the clock spring is a special rotary electrical connector located between the steering wheel and the steering column that maintains a constant electrical connection with the wiring while the vehicle's steering wheel is being turned. The wires from the airbag its electrical system connect through the clock spring, which coils and uncoils as the wheel is turned and maintains constant electrical contact. When removing the airbag assembly from the steering wheel, inspect the wiring connector of the airbag and clock spring to ensure that there is no damage. When the steering wheel is removed, the clock spring is easily visible. Inspect to ensure that the clock spring wire is not damaged. Typically, if the electrical wiring inside the clock spring is damaged, an SRS system code will set and the SRS light will be turned on. If it has been damaged in any way, it must be replaced and cannot be repaired. So another tip is when your horn does not work and you have an SRS light, it's probably a clock flip. They're all connected.
Effort applied to the steering wheel is transferred down the steering column or shaft to a steering box. In early years, the steering column was a straight shaft running inside a hollow tube. The steering wheel was attached to one end and the steering box to the other. In many frontal collisions, however, this caused serious injury to the driver, partly because it was forced back towards the driver's head, and partly because the sudden stop forced the driver onto the wheel.
He did.
To reduce this hazard, some steering columns are fitted with collapsible sections that protect the driver. During a collision, two forces are applied to the steering column. Plastic shear pins allow the lower shaft to move over the upper shaft. The steering column is connected to the input shaft of the steering gear by a flexible joint. This allows for alignment and reduces the transmission of road shocks back to the driver. Some steering columns have an intermediate shaft, which runs at an oblique angle from the column to the steering gear. In a collision, the universal joints on the shaft allow it to fold under, preventing the force of impact from being transferred directly to the column. Some manufacturers fit sensors and control units to the steering column, which provide information to steering control modules as part of an electric-assisted or four-wheel steering system. The sensor and control units are able to sense rotational pressure exerted by the driver and control both the speed and direction of the electric motor. This motor is contained inside the steering rack and provides the steering assistance. The steering column may also include switches for lights, indicators, wipers, and an ignition switch and lock assembly. Airbags are normally described as a supplemental restraint system, or SRS. But in some countries, wearing seatbelts is not mandatory, in which case airbags then become the primary restraint mechanism, and they would need to trigger at lower speeds and be larger in volume. There are a number of different types of airbag, their size and location determined by the type of protection they offer. The most common location for an airbag is in the center of the steering wheel. It protects the driver from frontal impacts. Airbags are also commonly fitted to the passenger side of dashboards for the same reason. Side impact airbags